Hello and happy Saturday. It's August 31st, 2024, and this is the DMZ America podcast. I am Ted Rall, editorial cartoonist, coming to you from the left.
And I'm editorial cartoonist Scott Stantis coming to you from the right. What the hell happened to August? Jesus Christ.
Well, what the fuck happened to the entire summer? I gotta say, it's still hot as shit.
Is
So,
it?
oh yeah, no, it's like humid. I mean,
Ugh.
the climate thing is just brutal. It's been vicious. I don't know if you saw the study that every day you spend in weather 95 degrees or higher takes 3 days off your life. Every day that you spend in weather 85 degrees or higher takes 2 days off your life. And I told this to someone, and he goes, well, wait a minute, what about all those people who live in like equatorial areas? And I'm like, yeah, that's why their life expectancy is like 28.
Yeah, down. I would say that could be true. However, in Alabama, we're also among the most obese states in the union. And
Mm.
so the most heart problems,
Actually,
the
though, that
most
might be,
diabetes.
it may follow, though, that because it's so hot, it's hard to exercise and to walk. It leads to a more sedentary lifestyle. I mean, you used to live in Arizona, and one of the things I was taken by when I went there was that the only time you see people like jogging is at like 5:30 in the morning because
Yeah.
it's the only time you can. And so, it's pretty, and even then, it's pretty fucking hot. It's like 70 degrees.
Yeah. No, here they've always been fat. It's just a really fat state. It's always among the fattest in the union.
Well,
Us,
it's the grit
Mississippi,
belt,
it's the
but it's worth
stank
it.
belt.
You eat great, you die early, whatever. It's worth it.
Yeah, actually, that doesn't sound bad.
No.
Um, so Kamala, Vice President of the United States, had an interview. Apparently, if you watched it, Ted has a slightly different take than I do, but if you watched it, you're convinced that she's never had an interview before. That was my takeaway, that it was just like, you had to be ready for this stuff. What are you going to do on the first softball question right out of the chute? What are you going to do on day one? And she
Mm.
couldn't. Janine had a great line, my wife, who doesn't care about politics, but when she said that was the first question, she goes, "I'm not going to be a dictator."
Oh, that's a good answer. I was thinking if she was really caught on the spot, and this did remind me a lot of when Ted Kennedy was asked, I think it was on
Yes,
60 Minutes,
yes.
why do you want to be president? And he couldn't answer the question. I mean, he couldn't even joke and say it's the family business. It's she did. I would have thought that even if she didn't she clearly doesn't have any policy prescriptions, and that's why she couldn't answer that question. But she could have at least said something symbolic, like, "Oh, I would." She could have said something cute, like, I would call and thank Joe Biden for his amazing service to the country. I would hang a portrait of Harriet Tubman in the Oval Office. I mean, she could come up with something that's
Yeah,
not
this
even
isn't.
controversial. She could say Susan B. Anthony would have a bust behind that I'd be putting on. I have a bunch of redecorating. I would.
What do you attribute that to? Because she's been in public life for a long time now. She was Attorney General for the state of California, 2 terms U.S. Senator,
Mm-hmm.
1 term as the Vice President. It's not as if she's like sitting down to an interview is a new thing. I mean, J.D. Vance at least has an excuse.
Well, I'm
So
beginning to think that Donald Trump is right about her and that she's not very smart. The entire interview was a bunch of. I mean, even the staging reflected a lack of smarts. I mean, she agreed to have Vance. I mean, not Vance. What's his name?
Walz,
Walls
Tim
in
Walz.
the foreground, right? So she's behind this big dude, and but she's the star. She should have insisted on sitting, reverse changing seats with him. The lighting was terrible. It made her look awful. The camera angle made her look terrible. She kept looking down at her feet. She missed opportunities for jokes, for example, or even just to be like funny. Like, for example, when she was asked about Trump's saying, "Oh, you're like black come lately," she should have said, Donald, he changed his skin color, so I don't understand why.
That would, and that's the one thing. And you and I both agree
She
on
was
this.
graceless, and she struck me the entire time. I was thinking, is this someone would I want to work with or work for this person? And the answer was No. If she was interviewing me and I didn't know who she was, I'd leave. I would like leave that interview. She didn't have any answer. Like, for example, on Israel, she needed, look, what does she need to do? She needs to, not offend AIPAC, but she also needs to not
Yeah.
offend her progressives. I know tons of progressives who are dying to vote for her. They just want to see a little bit of hope on the Israel front. Now, she didn't give them anything to work with. She was like reciting pablum about two-state solutions. We all know that's bullshit because Netanyahu and the Israelis have said for years they don't want a two-state solution. They're not even willing to talk or think about it. So that's never going to happen, right? So
I disagree.
Now we know she's just lying, and so she,
that's harsh.
She could have said, this would have been how I would have put it. I would have said, just a reminder, I'm not the president. We still have President Biden until January 20th. And I continue to support his policies.
Someone's going to have to tell him.
When good point. When I become president, however, I will continue to support Israel. But it is very urgent for us to bring this war to a rapid conclusion as soon as possible. And I will always support Israel, and leave it at that. But she couldn't even do that. She didn't.
Why? My question is,
she didn't talk about how on day one she'd do something about abortion. I will send a bill to the House of Representatives codifying Roe v. Wade. She couldn't mention. There was not a single bone for the progressives, right? Nothing. Like, not even like, oh, I'd like to increase this.
That's not who she's campaigning to now.
I know, but like, come on, you got to throw them something. I mean, they're watching. They're watching.
They are, but I'm not sure how much. And frankly, I mean, I think the turnout at the DNC convention just tells you exactly how unimportant they are, in that the streets were going to be brimming with protesters.
Oh, you're completely wrong about that. I mean, progressives.
They weren't there. I'm not wrong. That's an absolute fact.
No, they weren't there, but that doesn't mean anything. They weren't.
It does mean something. It means a lot.
In 2016, they were. They did not protest in the streets over. Over Hillary Clinton. They just didn't show up, and that's what's going to happen this time. They're just not going to show up for her. That's all. They're going to sit on their hands.
Which is, so why is she? They don't show up anyway.
They might have
under 35.
No, well, she's going to lose just like Hillary Clinton did.
I don't think.
According to the latest tracking polls, she's down. By the way, all the Vegas odds makers have now switched back to saying that Trump is favored to win. I mean, these are people who actually bet with their money, so that means a lot. She's down 5 points in the tracking polls. What do you
mean? She's down 5 points. What do you mean?
The tracking polls, internals, show that she lost 5 points in her lead. She's down from 6 to 2, which is within the rounding error.
Which we all knew would happen.
This was definitely a bad interview. No question.
It was a bad interview, and it had a high rating. So a lot of Americans watched it because they don't know
heard about it from their friends. Yes.
I think it was.
And the clips are everywhere.
Yeah, but the clips are like,
and nobody's bragging about it. By the way,
you're right.
You're
right.
Are not out there saying, "Look at what a great job she did."
But I want to get to the core of this. Is why I don't understand. I mean, this again, the reason I mentioned her resume is it's not like she hasn't been interviewed before.
Sure.
And I've seen other candidates that this happens to. They're good, solid, competent public officials, but you put them in an interview situation and they just can't do it. And is it because
they're not competent? Because that's part of the job. I mean, and also some of these answers, like on the flip-flopping, right? Which I personally don't think flip-flopping is that big a deal.
I don't. In fact, I agree with it.
I don't think you should. Well, I mean, it's like people change their mind, and all politicians do it. To me, I've never heard anyone say, "I'm not going to vote for someone because they flip-flopped." I've just never heard that. So I don't know if that's
I'm going to disagree. I think the numbers in 2004 with John Kerry, that was kind of the knock against him, and it hurt him deeply.
I thought it was like the parasailing and the swift boating is what did him in. And also the fact that we were a nation at war 3 years after 9/11.
And he was really not. He just never filled you with a lot of confidence.
More confidence than George W. Bush.
Bush still had the swagger, even though it was full of shit. He still had it. But here's the question, Ted. I still don't understand how someone who's been in politics for a long time can't handle an interview, and you can say she's stupid, and that may be true.
I think that's right.
Um,
I think she's
but no
stupid.
one, no one
I
is so.
literally have not found any. I've done a deep dive. I've not found any indication that she ever exuded brilliance, whether, as DA, as AG, as senator. No, I mean, there's just no evidence of that at all. It's no one says like, oh my God, her thesis in college was wow. I mean, there's nothing like that.
Well, a little bit of Nancy Pelosi as an example. I mean, public speaking, interviews, she's terrible. She is terrible. But it tells me that behind closed doors, she has to have something going on, because and comes off as tough, commanding, and in control, because you don't rise to the level of leadership she did without being able to do that. You don't
Well,
get.
I do remember her being 15 years ago, being an excellent speaker for sure. Public speaker. I really,
Really? Oh,
yeah,
I've
I
never
do.
heard that.
I
I would
thought she was
disagree.
very, I thought she was very impressive.
A lot of disagreeing going on in this podcast today. Whew.
That's good though, I guess. I mean, I don't know. I mean, we have different views of this, but I mean, I look here. Getting back to the flip flop thing, I wanted to get your read on that. Her answer 4 times was, my values haven't changed. That was, I thought, a terrible retort to be, and shouldn't have even been used once, but to repeat it 4 times, like, holy shit, what?
Yeah, that's a very no, but that's a very Obama thing to say. When
It's
Obama said
nothing.
he
It's saying
evolved.
nothing. It's literally not. It's literally, she uses a lot of words to say very little.
Yes, well, and that's what you wanted to. That's what she did during that interview, and I found it shocking, quite frankly. That's the part you and I are probably going to agree with, that she did not answer questions when this was an
Not
opportunity to
one.
look presidential.
Not
Um,
one. Not one. I mean, she literally, even the most softball question, right, about the answer, like, oh, what was it like when Biden called you and told you he was stepping aside, right? In other words, you're basically, you answer the door, and there's Ed McMahon with the foam core check and the balloons and the man, and like it, and like, and she was like, oh, I'm going to tell you something I'm probably not supposed to tell you. No, you're not. She didn't say anything. It's like, what? She made bacon. I guess the vegan vote's going to be mad. She talked about her pancakes. She was making pancakes. I mean, no. I mean, she literally, her instinct on every single matter is to deflect, lie, and run out the clock. I mean, honestly, I've never seen I can't think of a politician this congenitally dishonest since Donald Trump. She is like Donald Trump. There's no fucking straightforward anything out of this woman. She will not tell you the truth about any. She will not tell you if the sky is rising, if the sun is rising in the east. She will not tell you if the sky is blue. I mean, you just,
yeah, I think calling
believe
that
a
line
word out of this woman.
This isn't a lie. I think it's she was tap
Dissembling,
dancing, obfuscating. That's a good word, and it's fun to
deflecting,
say. But you can't
even
only
when there's
deflect
no
so much.
need to.
I mean, Trump goes into interviews 180 degrees the other way. He just unprepared, but just says what's on his mind,
Right.
and hence it comes off as authentic.
Yes.
And that's where she really needs. I thought her convention speech was very, very good. It did what it had to do, and she did a good job.
Yay, Biden.
No,
I mean Harris.
no, she did it well. And you know that there are times when you don't do it well. I thought inviting Walz when he wasn't invited to the interview was weird, and
It looked bad too.
well, it just didn't look good because he just sat there and smiled. Apparently, he can do that.
Well, he did answer some questions toward the end.
A few, but no, I mean, come on. It just looked, like you said, the look was not great. This was not, this was not a hit, but it wasn't a strikeout, like you say, it
Well,
is.
I mean,
And
I think when you look, she needed. The problem is this is not her 75th interview of the campaign, right? I mean, it had been 40 days. It's the only thing we have to look at. It's a softball. I remind you, this was a taped interview. You can only imagine the shit that was on the cutting room floor. I'd love to see it though.
yeah,
And I mean, I came away from this like, wow, you had a friendly interviewer in Dana Bash who clearly Donna Bash, who obviously likes her. and Walz, and is obviously, sympathetic to the Democrats. The questions were not hard. She was not Chris Matthews holding her feet to the fire for failing to answer the questions. She and she just couldn't. I mean, you're paying attention and everybody's like, oh, it's like this. Now, I have to admit, I didn't think it would be like this at all. I thought, I was thinking of the example of Nico, who was the singer who Andy Warhol forced upon the Velvet Underground. She was a Teutonic, tall German model. And Lou Reed and the gang were like, why the fuck do we have to deal with this dumb bitch? But Nico just decided to take the opportunity really, really seriously and took voice lessons and studied and like bought lots of records and listened to tons of shit and became one of the most amazing chanteuses of the 20th century. And so I was thinking, Kamala Harris, she had to know when she was vice president to the oldest person to have ever been president, that there was a strong chance she might be running this year. If it had been me, I would have been like, wow, God has blessed me with this amazing opportunity. I am going to kick major ass here. Man, no, she doesn't kick ass. She is devoid of ass kicking. It is
well, and that's the thing is that at this stage,
sorry, that's what's just, it's disastrous. That's why I think it's disastrous.
I don't think it's disastrous. I really don't. I think it's not great, but it's not disastrous. What's disastrous is this debate. If she puts in the same type of performance, is unable to answer a question
or unwilling.
Well, I think there's strategy coming into it. I think the Democratic candidate's idea of coming into this is that Trump will implode. He'll just be Trump and be stupid. And she just has to sit back and kind of mumble things. I don't know that you can count on that. And even when he's terrible,
Sun Tzu, never underestimate or disrespect your enemy.
Precisely. And I think that's what happened with Hillary. I think her thinking was, and let's look at the circle she ran in,
they think
all these rich,
think he's an idiot.
Yeah.
And be that as it may, he did beat her in 2016. And
damn
he
near
came fucking close in 2020.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think they better be prepared, and she better, I don't know if she should take a hit off, get some edibles or something and just relax and really just be yourself. And I'm wondering if herself is just so unpleasant that they don't dare do it. I can't figure that part out. That's where I keep coming back to that question of how do you have this interview and how is it so bad?
Well, what do you think the answer is?
I thought she started listening to somebody because her speeches improved tremendously. I thought, oh, she finally got a media person who she trusts, who she listens to, who she will follow. But apparently they didn't go over, how do you have a sit down interview? You sit up straight. What posture do you have? You talk to the person, you laugh, you say, listen, hey, my kids, my kids came home. I'm sorry, my stepkids came home. I mean, I just consider them my kids.
Mm-hmm.
Little stupid moments like that mean a lot.
Yeah.
And she seems unable or unwilling, but maybe unable to do that.
Well, it definitely felt adversarial. I mean, I felt almost like she said she was a prosecutor. Looks to me more like she felt like a defendant being deposed, where she was trying to not answer the questions.
Now, is this intrinsic in her personality? Does she simply not like to be questioned? If that's true, that's bad. That's a bad element of your personality. You and I question each other's ideals, ideas, perspectives, and policies. I mean, shit, every day, practically.
True.
That's how you learn, expand, learn to embrace what you embrace, learn to let go of, flip flop, if you will, on other issues, because, you're saying, okay, I thought about this. I thought about what Ted said. He was right. I was wrong, or I was right. He was wrong, whatever. If she's unable to do that, that's a pathological disorder.
Agreed. And no, I mean, let's go through it though. I mean, tell me if I'm missing any options, right? So the options are that she views the media as the enemy and therefore plays all her cards close to the vest, or she just isn't properly media trained, or she just doesn't have the skill to be interviewed correctly. It's just not a natural thing for her, or she's not very smart, or she resents having to answer any questions from any.
Yeah. I think that's the
What do you
latter. If
what do
it's
you
the
think of it?
latter, it's going to come out in the debate. That will come out because we're seeing it again. Debate is, I mean, she could, I mean,
She wasn't very good in, in the 2019 debate. The only moment she had was a rehearsed one. I was the
yeah.
girl on the bus. She had that canned, she recited it, she regurgitated it, it landed. Okay. But she never had a moment that was like, think about, Lloyd Benson. I knew Jack Kennedy. Jack Kennedy was a friend of mine. He didn't rehearse that. That just popped into his mind at the time.
And not just that, but Benson was also an old senator who actually deserved to be an old senator. He was on Ways and Means. He was on all the important committees. He's a smart guy and had been a
Yeah.
senator for 20 or plus years. Um, and that's where with Harris, it's just still so head scratching. And I think it may come down to ego, the fact that she can't hold on to staff.
I mean, she just may be an asshole.
Yeah, I mean, she may just be an asshole, and we're
So we'll
definitely
have
going
an
to,
asshole off on September 8th in 9 days. Uh,
yeah,
and
an asshole off.
I mean, because certainly he's an asshole too. I mean, I kind of think it's really funny. I think, by the way, what died, and you're gonna, I think, agree with me. You know what died in that interview? The joy. There was no
Mm.
joy in that fucking
Okay,
interview.
that you and I will agree on. There was no joy, and she has to exude. I mean, that's what was great about the speech and about her presence on the stage was there seemed to be a level of joy. You know, this is the happy warrior.
Yeah,
And
no, but there was not so much. I mean, she can
not
play
at all,
she
not
can
at
play
all.
one on TV, but not when she can't do improv, you know? And
Yeah,
an
she.
interview is improv. An interview is like, I mean, like, definitely there were several times when she should have, made some jokes. She should have, showed us a little bit about, think about, like, if you go, I would recommend anybody to do this, go on YouTube and search up some JFK press conferences
Oh
when he
God.
gets out from behind the podium and he's like walking around like Oprah, leaning up against the podium and shooting the shit with the White House press corps. I mean, this is like a relaxed guy. He's totally like, and they're laughing their asses off. They love
Yeah.
him, right? And it's like, because he
Well,
was great. He knew how to charm. And
and on a
frankly,
different
this is her
side,
job. She's a politician. She wants to be president. If you can't be, if look, if you can't charm the public, you can't be a politician.
on the other side, I was watching. I'm not sure how I fell into this rabbit hole, but here it is. Richard Nixon interviews, one-on-one interviews, not
Mm-hmm.
press conferences. Press conferences, he was pretty. He really got mad. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, that one time, you will think how sad you'll be. You won't have Richard Nixon to kick around anymore, because he had a terrible sense of humor.
That
It
was the
was never.
checkers speech, right?
No. That was after he
Oh, after he
got
lost in
shot,
64.
lost the governor's race in California in '62
Oh, 62, yeah.
to Jerry Brown's father. Um, but the one-on-one interviews with Nixon are fascinating because the guy is so smart,
Yeah.
so in tune with the issues, and especially when it goes into foreign policy, but even domestic policy, he was just naming the minority leader, the majority leader, this senator, this congressman, that person in the cabinet member, and it's remarkable. And you can see, oh, okay, now I see how a guy that
Well,
charmless.
Nixon Frost, man, those interviews are amazing.
They are. The fact that he could get into the minutia, but that was Nixon unmasked, really. Nixon, people joke Nixon on the beach. It was like he's wearing a full suit and took his shoes off. He's, but Nixon just talking about the machinations of governing and on foreign policy and other things and you go, okay, this guy was elected on competence. He just knew what the fuck he was doing. She doesn't exude that.
How come? Yeah, no, she doesn't exude that. How does she not? She doesn't have an agenda, right? That's really true. That's why she couldn't
She's
answer
had to walk it
that
back, and
first
she's
day. I mean,
so.
it's like, okay, I'm going to do it right now. President, Mr. Stantis, congratulations. You are you have now 274 electoral votes. You are the president elect. What do you plan to do on January 20th?
well, not be a dictator to begin with.
Mhm.
But I'm going to look at health. We're going to right out of the chute.
Her
We have
answer
to
was
look at,
her answer was we're going to help the middle class. By the way, after saying she was going to be the
yeah.
president of all Americans, I guess fuck the poor and fuck the rich,
Oh yeah. What did they ever do for you?
which by the way, I would never say.
Well, wait, you didn't let me answer the question. I would say I would have an agenda. Right now, I would aggressively work with the transportation department to open up supply lines so prices can go down. That's the one way that's going to happen. That's what I do on day one. The rest of the agenda, about, health insurance, about foreign policy, but the first job has to be to start getting these prices down, down, down. Let's try this. Governor Rall, you're running for president of the United States. Congratulations on getting the Democratic Party's nomination. Assume for a moment that on November 5th, you end up being the winner. Come the swearing in on January 20th. What is the first thing you will do as president of the United States?
Well, thanks for that question. I would immediately fly Air Force One to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. And there I would personally padlock the entire facility, contact the President Castro of Cuba, and turn over the entire facility to Cuba and apologize for having stolen it during the Spanish-American War, and immediately release all of the detainees and bring them back with me to the United States, apologize to each and every one of them on national television, and apologize to the world for the fact that we, as Americans, decided to betray our own values for more than 20 years following the 9/11 attacks, legalizing torture, extraordinary rendition, all sorts of things that are foundationally anti-American and un-American. Everyone involved in this facility, we're going to get to the bottom of it right away. We're going to have a congressional investigation. We're going to have trials for anybody who worked there.
Oh wait, do you hear that? Do you hear that? It's the leadership of the DNC killing themselves.
But that's why I don't run for president. But the point is that, like, there's many reasons why I wouldn't run for president, but that's merely one. But my point is, I know what I would do. I know what I would do. And
yeah, no, and I know what I would do. I mean, and that's the thing, is that it's not like you have to. I mean, I understand the nerves. And if you're not, but she shouldn't have them at this stage of her career. She just shouldn't. This should come as.
No, you're right.
This is just like, listen, I can ask you any. I mean, I could. Okay, let me do this. Let me try something else. Senator Rall, obviously the struggle in Ukraine continues. Will you continue to support the Zelensky government, and both militarily and monetarily, as president of the United States?
No, Scott, I would not. And here's
see,
why.
You have an answer like that.
Yes. Yeah. And I would, it's like, yeah, no, I mean, it's the same thing. Like if I say, okay, Governor Stantis, how, it's now been almost a year since the October 7th attack. Now over 40,000 Palestinians are reported dead. Israel still seems to be having trouble clearing Hamas even from areas that they claim to control. It doesn't seem that they're any closer to victory, yet Palestinians lives and Israeli lives are being lost every day. Would you continue to supply weapons, training, and interference at the United Nations Security Council on behalf of the state of Israel? If so, why or why not?
Well, the answer is an unequivocal yes. I would continue our support of our closest ally in the Middle East, blah, 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 blah,
right.
blah.
But you know the answer, right? And
but you could also come back and say, and I disagree with you on the two-party solution. I still think that's viable. It's not viable with Netanyahu, but it's the only.
It's not viable to say, okay, it's not what I'm trying to get at is it's not viable to say I'm going to support Israel and I'm going to push for a two-party solution when the Israel that you're supporting is against the very thing the solution that you claim to have. Supporting the state of Israel and supporting Netanyahu means that you're accepting the status quo of no two-party discussions, no two-state solution, right? I mean, the two states, it's like, it's not like there was another Israeli government waiting in the wings that would be open to discussing that. So it's sort of like telling, oh, I'm going to support Zelensky in Ukraine, but only if he agrees to make peace with Russia, which is something that he says he will not do. Right. So
Right.
it's just like dumb. It's like, I support Clovis, but he must lose his affection for mice and flightless birds. It's like, that's
I disagree with that. I think there's plenty of movement politically inside Israel for a two-state solution. It's just a matter of those people. No, I think it is.
The polls are very clear. I mean, I think the Israeli public, it's like support for two-state solutions, like 10% of the population. Nobody supports.
Well, I'm going to say right now, of course not, especially after the October 7th attacks. Let me ask you this, and then we should probably tie things up for this segment. But the mainstream media's response to the interview, your response right out of the chute on Center Clip, I listened to it, and was pretty strong. It was,
I couldn't believe
it was a catastrophe. It was bad. Listening to the mainstream media,
I thought she'd be a lot better.
Oh, I thought I did too. I really was shocked. I thought that, okay, she's over that hump. Now she's just going to be relaxed, answer the questions, and she looks at the person, whoever it is asking the question, like, who the fuck are you to ask me?
Mm-hmm.
And you got to get over that. Okay.
It's bad.
So on the mainstream media's response to the interview, though, I wake up to NPR. So I listen to that, obviously read New York Times, look at what CNN, all of them were like, pretty much, did you follow any of this? It was almost, it was almost like almost like it didn't happen.
Yeah.
The one thing they took away,
didn't cover it. Yeah.
The headline they took away was when Harris said that she would appoint a Republican to her cabinet, which
that's right.
Democrats have done.
The only news she made.
Right. And maybe that's a win. And that's why I think it's not a loss for her, because nobody really paid that much attention. She's so afraid to make a fuck up that she will say nothing. And so she said this about bringing a Republican into the cabinet. My question to you, and I know I'm in the mainstream media, I draw for two mainstream media, the Dallas Morning News and for the Chicago Tribune. So I can answer this, but I want to know what your take is that they didn't cover it. It's literally like it didn't happen.
That's why I think so. I guess this is an interesting way to look at it, right? So, Scott, I'll grant you that, like, it's kind of like it didn't push her. Well, it did hurt her in the polls, but it didn't hurt her as much maybe as it could have. But is a squandered opportunity at this level a loss? I think it is. I mean, it's a squandered opportunity. It's not catastrophic like Biden's debate performance, but it's definitely a squandered opportunity. And so, and I think I think I did read through the lines of the fact that Democratic organizations were not covering it with any kind of like zeal or repetition or analysis.
Right.
To me, that was like, they know that she fucked up, and that was their take. And so they're like, okay, never mind. We'll just move on. Like,
nothing to see here, folks.
Like Surf Pro, like it never even fucking happened. And I think that's really how it was. So to me, that's a catastrophe. People were paying close attention. I mean, as people are much less interested in policy than they are in sort of a general casting call, like a sort of feeling like, can I see this person as president? Well, she can underestimate Trump, but he's got one big fucking thing going for him. He's been president. So people can imagine him as president because he was president. They can't imagine her as president because, hell, she's barely even been vice president. They can't imagine it. So they needed to see, like, I could see her, meeting with Putin or Xi or whoever. I need to see, can I imagine that? Also, Scott, let me tell you this. When I watched it for the very first time in my life, I was like, God, how short is she? And
she's tiny.
And I Googled it. She's 5'2". She would be the shortest president by far. Madison was
only 2 inches.
Madison was
5'4".
supposedly 5'4". But the point is that like, but why did that cross my mind in that interview? Think about that. That interview was like I've seen her standing, like at the DNC. I didn't see her standing on phone books or anything. She seemed, she did. I mean, I knew she wasn't like, Brittany Grimes, but but still, I was like, she came off short. So to paraphrase Sunset Boulevard, politics didn't get small, Kamala got small.
Yeah, I think this debate, everything rides. This is the game. It's what, 10 days?
Well, let's talk about that. Yeah, it's September 8th. Okay, so it's the same rules as last time, even though she wanted to change it up on the mic. The rules are definitely to Trump's advantage, although ironically they were for Biden originally, to have the muted mics.
Yeah. I thought he conceded to having the mic stay live.
No. Lives, the old rules.
Are you sure?
Well, it's been back and forth. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that to be true. And anyway, but the point is, how is that? I guess it's like, it's almost like I don't expect much out of her. She'll have a few dumb canned lines about him being, I'm sure.
Yes.
And, like, oh, glad you could make it so that you're not in prison or something like that. I'm sure she'll say something like that. I don't think that's very effective, but she'll do that. He's got a tougher row to hoe because he can't, he can't dog whistle on race or gender. I mean, he can, but it would be a big mistake.
He will.
Well, it would be a mistake. He should not. I would, if I were him, I would put her on the spot about specifics. Like really, truly, like, what will you do?
What are you talking about? He's incapable of that. He's never shown any interest.
Then it may be a draw. It may end up being just sort of like, all the Democrats are like, hey, yay, she's not Trump. All the Republicans are like, yay, he's not her. And that's it.
Yeah, it could. Yeah, it could. She has to come off as, motherly and likable. I mean, that's and people roll their eyes.
Does she have to be motherly? Yeah, I guess she does.
Yeah, I think you have to. She's going to take on, or prosecutorial, and that is, she's going to have to grill, but it's not. There are no direct questions.
No.
But so she has to respond to what he says.
Prosecutorial, because he'll just ignore what she says if she.
I know, but not if she gets under his skin, which I think she is capable of doing.
I think he's far more capable of self-control than people think.
No, he's not going to start drooling or anything. But when you piss him off a little bit, if you hit him, he always hits you back with a closed fist.
Right.
You could hit him with swipe his cheek with a feather, and he'll come back with a gauntlet to punch you in the mouth.
That's not because he's mad. It's because he for him, that's just like standard operating procedure. Right.
But that's what you do. And you also make it look like I don't know that he has the self-control he had when he was younger. I think he's an old man, and he's not a healthy one. I mean, you saw that when he was on stage at the RNC and he went to walk over and hugged the police, the firefighter uniform, and walked back. It was 10 paces and he was out of breath. This guy is old, fat, and out of shape. So that has an impact on your cognitive abilities.
Sure.
That's where she can also kind of hit him. But yeah, the debate, this debate is everything, and she has to come off as presidential. You're right, because you're right. We've seen him as president. It's we didn't like it, but
so I don't think the democracy thing works, for the simple reason that, again, he was president for 4 years. It's not like Adolf Hitler is running for re-election in 1941. He was chancellor from 1933 to 1937. Then he's been hanging out from 1937 to 1941, building the Autobahn. And now he's really going to install dictatorship. Even if that's true, you don't believe it,
Yeah, I think she has to, like I said, she has to come off as very much in control, very much, because she's going to have to negotiate with Putin. She's going to have to negotiate with Z. She's going to have to confront Iran. She's going to have to tell Netanyahu to knock that shit off.
Also, what about the way she talks? Holy shit.
It's not great.
it's, I mean, like, she talks like you're an idiot. And also
Yeah.
how she spreads everything out. Like she's like, like when you're in college and your friends are like, come out and party with with us tonight. It's gonna be awesome. And you're like, dude, I can't. I got an 8-page paper. They're like, just fill it up the page, and you're trying to you make wide margins, and you're just filling up. She sounds like that. She's literally like the national security policy of the United States of America, as opposed to U.S. foreign policy. You know what I mean? She stretches everything out. She doesn't say a fucking thing. She doesn't say anything. She feels like she's wasting your fucking time when she's talking.
Mm.
Do you think that matters?
Oh yeah, of course.
I
Yeah,
mean,
deliveries.
or is it all about on television? Is it just about like how she looks?
Well, that's a huge part of it. I think you were right, and I know this is a petty thing, and we should probably wrap things up. But when they put her downstage or upstage from Walz, first of all, Walz being in the foreground made him look even bigger than her. And
Yeah,
he's a big guy. He's
yeah,
6'2" or something, and he's a
yeah.
beefy guy. And so she kind of dwarfed her. I would have insisted if I was her to have raised the seat.
Mhm.
Um, there's just a lot of ways to deal with that. So well, it's all coming down to this
Also,
debate, and
this
that's
weird fucking setting too. Like it was like,
it
and
was a restaurant, right? It was
it
like
was
a
in a
diner.
it was in a restaurant diner kind of thing, and it looked ugly. Everything was brown. It looked like COVID. Like, oh, and by the way, I don't understand. So Scott, riddle me this. So this event takes place in Savannah, which is in the state of Georgia. And you know what else is in Georgia? CNN has a giant office tower in downtown Atlanta. Why didn't they just go there?
I
Or
think it.
or I'm sure Savannah has a local TV affiliate. Why can they say thank you to Action News 12 for lending us their studio? I mean, this reminded me of like the Stephanopoulos interview with Biden, where they got like a elementary school
Yeah, that was weird.
library, and it's like, what, you don't have? We are still an advanced industrial nation. We have television studios. Use one.
Yes, and I mean, but I do understand not going to Atlanta. She has Atlanta. Atlanta's going to vote for Harris by a wide margin. She
For
needs
the
to, if she wants, what's that?
interview, like with
No, no, no.
proper
I get no, no, no. Don't forget,
everything.
everything's a bone towards trying to elicit some kind of support from that part of the world. That's why, it used to be you picked a vice
You didn't
president
really
because you want.
feel Savannah and the beauty of this old
No,
classic
but they
southern
no, but they
city
knew it
in
was
that
there.
fucking space. No, you
And
didn't.
Savannians knew. More importantly, Savannians knew
Okay,
that.
great. That'll make no difference at all.
It makes a difference. It does make a difference that, all that historic event was here. If you're on the fence, or if you think, you hate Donald Trump, or you don't like him, or you think, is there an alternative? Then you think, okay, they threw some, they did something important here.
There has to be some better space, like a house museum or something where they could have done it in Savannah.
Well, there's beauty. Yeah, God,
It's
there's
a
so many
beautiful
beautiful
city,
places. Oh,
supposedly.
it really is. It's gorgeous.
It's famously beautiful. So, like, come on,
Yeah.
they didn't have like a town hall they could have used instead.
I'm just saying. I mean, that
It
didn't
was a
bother me
fuck
that
up. It was
much.
a colossal fuck up, I thought.
No, I think no, come on. She's trying to be just plain folks, It reminds me of a little bit of when Elizabeth Warren did the I'm going to get me a beer. Fuck you. You don't talk like that. You don't drink beer. You don't, I mean, that's just not,
No,
don't try to be
you're a
folksy.
white wine, you're a white wine lady. You're a
Yeah, you're a
Pinot
white wine
Grigio
lady
lady.
from
Everybody,
Massachusetts.
for sure. It's why we love
Um,
her. Yeah.
yeah, but and that was the thing is that about Elizabeth Warren, that's one of those instances where just be you. You're smart. You're immersed in all of the important minutia of running the government. It's okay to be smart. It is okay. In fact, the American people, I
Yourself.
guarantee you, are starving for smart right now.
Right. Well, TV is a huge authenticity detector. And you can really see when people are full of shit on television, I think.
Oh yeah, no doubt. And especially, well, when you're being interviewed, one-on-one interview, the camera's tight. You're going to see what
Yeah, by
kind
the
of
way, the
person.
Walls thing, because of the format, it wasn't even like they were back and forth like where he's piping in and she's piping in on him. It was like, it was just like boom with her. It's like, oh, and then Gilligan's Island and the rest over here, big walrus over here. It's like, it was just like, it was pointless. It was complete because of the format. It was entirely counterproductive to have him there. Complete.
Yeah. No, I agree. It seemed to be like a safety net for her, which seemed peculiar. I mean, but don't forget, we're still dealing with a candidate who, you know, stumbled, bumbled, fumbled, and tripped into the nomination.
True.
Okay. So,
although I think the fix was in, I think the truth is she was having convos years ago internally with her closest compadres, and they were all sitting around thinking like, so how are we going to do this? And I think people came to her and said, hey, so, we're thinking of, pushing out Joe. We're going to try to figure out how to do it. I think this was all determined years ago.
Yeah, I think, well, that's where, I mean, that
there
was
the question of she was asked that, right? Like when did you start to notice that Joe?
Yeah. And she totally didn't answer that one.
Right.
But that was my first question on Center Clip, which Ted and I both do. It's a very short mini podcast, as it were. And the question of the day was, what question would you ask Vice President Harris? And my question was, when did you know how did you find out Joe Biden had lost his cognitive ability to be president, and when did you know it?
Mm-hmm.
And if it's 2 years ago, then you're culpable for foisting a huge fraud and effectively facilitating a coup d'etat in the United States.
I'm sorry. I think it's an act of treason for everybody involved.
Yeah, no, it absolutely was. Absolutely. So let's wrap this segment up. We got one more coming. All
right, here we go.
Okay.
Right. Stay here.
Stick around.
Right back. Welcome back to section 2, even new and even better, probably not than section 1.
It's quilted
podcast. It's now with fresheners for August 31st. Thanks so much for listening. I'm Ted Rall, coming to you from the left.
Scott Stantis from the right.
So Scott, the other big story of the week in the political campaign is on the Republican side. The reproductive rights really seem to have shot up. So according to some of the latest polls, particularly in the battleground states, abortion and reproductive rights writ large on issues like in vitro fertilization are now the #1 issues for these voters in these swing states, even surpassing the economy. That, according to the latest New York Times Siena College poll, this has been reflected by Donald Trump's all over the place reaction. He said at one point that J.D. Vance said that Trump would veto any attempt at a national abortion ban that crossed his desk. He also says that he's opposed to a Florida statute that limits abortion to 6 weeks, which basically makes it almost impossible for anyone to get an abortion because very few women become aware that they're pregnant quite that quickly. Now, the pro-life faction within his party barked at him and forced him to walk that back. But he has said privately for quite some time that he knows that the party's pro-life stance is a loser for the Republicans, and he's deeply concerned about it. The Dobbs decision has completely turned everything on its head. And then, perhaps most strangely, he came out not only in favor of in vitro fertilization, something that pro-life people are opposed to because it requires the creation and disposal of fertilized embryos that then have to be, basically dumped, the extras. And he said not only is he okay with it, but he thinks the federal government should subsidize it because we have a fertility crisis in this country. Trump is very nervous about abortion.
Yeah. Well, they have these measures on different ballots across the country, some in battleground states, and Trump doesn't know what to do. Trump he went in front of the Christian voters, or whatever the hell they called themselves, and said, I'm proud of getting rid of Roe v. Wade. He's on record saying it. They're using it in commercials. He can't say he didn't. Well, he could and probably will say, I never said that. And of course, he did say it. One of the most effective moments of the Democratic National Convention, I don't know, reproductive rights night was, I believe it was Tuesday night, and they had the 4 or 5 women who had been hurt by the laws already.
Mm-hmm.
And it was extremely powerful. And it's a powerful issue. And I think that suburban, just women in general, are going to, you have this massive gulf now for the first time since Trump's won, a run, not one, run, that there's a huge gender gap now between the two candidates. And Trump is so nervous. Ted and I were talking about this just before we started recording. He's going after the bro vote, which, he has instinctually. He's going to it's one of those things you shouldn't have to spend time shoring up, but he's doing it this past week. That's how nervous he is. And and his polling is telling him that too. Abortion is a huge issue. I opposed abortion, although the way this came down is absolutely against my other core beliefs of the government staying the fuck out of our business. But by turns, here in Alabama, where they outlawed IVF, it's just like, what? And folks, I've said this a million times, and it's turning out to be true. These Republican nutbags want to ban birth control. I mean, it's like, it's so nuts. And nobody believes me when I say this. And then I show them the quotes that these Republican elected officials have said. And now there's actually legislation in different state legislators, particularly, obviously Rust Belt, Southern, and Idaho, and out whatever the hell else is out that way. My point is, this is a killer issue for the Republicans. And Trump, how many abortions do you suppose he's paid for in his life?
I bet a good half dozen. 10.
Yeah, at least. I mean, that would be a good question to ask him, quite frankly.
Yeah, it'd be a great question to ask him. Oh my God.
He'll lie. I mean, he just would just out and out lie. And how could you find out otherwise? But my point is, this is, I think he thought it'd be a harmless issue. And, you overturn Roe v. Wade. What's the worst that can happen? Well, then you get Bubba Joe Bubba, Republican from Alabama, who writes the legislation, and he's, functionally developmentally disabled.
And the legislation for the presidency.
And of course, or for the cabinet at least, although he hasn't cut off the head of a whale. God almighty. What the fuck? Can we talk about that for just Robert Kennedy Jr. for just a moment? What is wrong with him? I mean, brainworm, bear cub, whale head, anti-vaxxer, QAnon nutbag. I mean, is something wrong with him?
Well, my colleague and friend, Greg Palast, who's a very well-regarded leftist writer, most famous for his work on election integrity, he published a piece that was very sad, basically saying that, arguing that he feels like he was there and watching his friend RFK Jr. lose his mind. He doesn't know what causes it. He's a polemicist. He's not a doctor, but he said, he did watch him just get stranger and stranger. And that, he said that he had a tendency to be very conspiratorial and to sort of take conspiracy theories at face value, not being open-minded to them and then like thinking, oh, let's check into this, but more like, if it's a conspiracy, it's probably true because the government's never up to any good. And as opposed to just being skeptical like a journalist and just being like, look, when you hear, just because the government says something doesn't necessarily mean it's true. If your mother says she loves you, check it out. That he just increasingly became less and less like that. And he got to the point where he was just unreliable. Now, that's all, of course, hearsay. I don't know Bobby at all. It does, look, this brings up to me a really kind of big philosophical question, which is, I think we probably can agree that there is something mentally wrong with Bobby. I think there's, like, in the same way, we certainly can agree that Kanye West, there's something wrong with him.
Yeah.
So the question is it appropriate reaction when someone, even though it's in the political space, says something that is the result of mental illness, or appears to be, we don't know. I mean, is it appropriate to attack that? I don't really think it is. I think you're kind of like missing the point, right? So like if a brain worm makes you, suddenly start, okay, like Tourette's, like if someone with Tourette's starts spewing racist stuff, they may or may not actually be a racist, but to just respond like, that's wrong, you're a racist, you're a bad person, it's kind of missing the point. The Tourette's is the point. And and I think maybe people who are going after RFK for his political opinions or purported political opinions are missing the point. I think it's like maybe it's not a political discussion at all. It's really a health discussion.
Mm. Well, I would say that, and now coupled with, and I've shared this with Ted, and I want to get back to Trump and the GOP and abortion. Donald Trump, during his interview, a recent interview, they took a big chunk of it, just the words, and transcribed it, and they showed it to a psychiatrist, and without attribution. They didn't say who said it. They didn't say, who it came from, the age. They did say this was a white male. What do you make of this? And he said, and the psychiatrist, being a professional, being a medical professional, said, well, I can't, none of this is binding. None of this is, because I don't have context. But if I spoke to an interviewed, a grown individual who spoke like this, my first reaction is twofold. One, they have a vocabulary of a fifth grader. And two, their IQ would be roughly 73, which is 3 points above developmentally disabled, both of which I think, that's not, in describing Donald Trump, that's not far off. He uses very small words.
Mm-hmm.
He reuses words. His sentence construction, his word construction. So when it comes to try to parse or dance around the abortion issue, and the Republicans in various states have not done him any favors. Here in Alabama, for instance, Ted, we have, like I said, Bubba Joe Bubba wrote the legislation. And it scares the shit out of OBGYNs to the point where they're leaving the state in droves because they're terrified to practice.
Right.
I live in a county just south of Jefferson County. Jefferson County has Birmingham. I live just barely over the county line in Shelby County. Shelby County just closed its last birthing center. And this is a big booming county for Alabama. That's just happened all across the state, that there are birthing centers. And these aren't abortion mills. These are birthing centers, places where people, give birth, hence the name. And the OBGYNs and the companies that run these are faced with legislation that is so badly written, so badly conceived, and they can't execute their job with any certitude because these laws are so fucking stupid. Now, if you're Donald Trump and you run on this, not in Alabama, he's going to win Alabama by 55, 60 points. But let's say a state like Georgia, let's say a state like Michigan or Wisconsin or Pennsylvania, and you say, they're closing down birthing centers in around Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. This is, what does he do? Because he is in a quandary. You mentioned Kamala not throwing a bone towards the progressives. He's tried to throw bones to the Christian right. And if he comes out and says that he is actually for abortion or like for access to abortion or anything like that, if he comes out again, or he comes out against some of the state measures that are on the ballots now, Ted, where they say, we want to legalize and codify Roe v. Wade for our state. He can't throw it. He can't say, well, we need to throw it to the states. That's where it belongs. You can't say that anymore because you've seen what the states have done with it and they fucked it up.
Yeah.
And they're killing women. Child mortality has gone up in the red states that passed these laws significantly, Ted. They're literally, because they don't like abortion, but they're killing babies. So, I don't know what Trump can't. He's never been able to nuance anything. You can't tap dance around this. He can't. He doesn't have the ability. He doesn't have the intellectual ability, and he certainly doesn't have the political sense to do it. I mean, it's going to be, that's where, if we get back to the debate we talked about in the first segment, that's where she can nail his ass to the wall.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't know though. I mean, it's just like, it's really, it's interesting. I mean, I don't know what I would do if I were him. I think I would have to get my troops in line and say, look, this is a loser for me. I need these swing states. I'm not going to, you already know I was there for you with 3 Supreme Court justices, but I need this. You got to give me some leeway here. Otherwise, they're going to end up with President Harris.
So what does leeway look like? What are you talking about?
I think he should come out with nobody expects him to nationally legalize abortion. Obviously, that's not going to happen. But if I were him, I would push for I would just sort of say personally, like the old Joe Biden stance. Joe Biden stance used to be, I'm personally against abortion because I'm a Catholic, but officially, I think a woman should have the right to choose, but it's a tragedy. Abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. He should have the opposite of that. I don't think that the government, I'm uncomfortable with the government regulating this, but there's really not much choice. Personally, I think that we should have perhaps up to 12 weeks or 14 weeks like the Europeans do. But and we should certainly have exceptions for the life of the mother and incest and rape and so on. But this is now with the states, and it should stay with the states. The Supreme Court has ruled, and we are stuck with that.
Right. Well, the Democrats are going to come back and say we want to have a national, effectively reestablishing Roe v. Wade as a federal statute.
Mm-hmm. Which, by the way, now a lot of pro-choice people are saying that Roe v. Wade didn't go far enough in terms of legalizing abortion, because I forget how many weeks it is. I think it's 22, but it basically goes up to fetal viability as it was defined in 1973. And they would, like, pro-choice people say, no, that's a baseline. Now it should be much further. It should be maybe 7 months or 9 months or whatever, but there should be no time limit whatsoever. It should just be on demand. That's it.
Yeah, I had serious issues with that, but that's probably another podcast. So Trump is, he's stumbling, bumbling, fumbling. Do you get that impression? It's still, if you look at the rallies, he just seems like the same old Trump. But none of the stuff is landing. Is it just me? Because it's not going to land.
The rallies are only for the rallies. His people love him no matter what. They will support him. I don't think the rallies matter. I think what matters is his messaging vis-a-vis Kamala, and is stuff landing, like on X and on Truth Social. And I don't think it's landing. I think that's he doesn't know what her Achilles heel is. And the problem is, it seems to be that she's not that smart, but the problem is he can't be the messenger of that. Otherwise, he comes off as a sexist.
And a racist.
Yeah.
Which I think he
is. The problem is that even a racist sexist can be right once every 4 years. And I think in this particular case, he probably is.
Well, okay. So the debate is when? September 8th? Okay. So, and the September 10th is the vice presidential. They're having 2 debates. Is that true?
Yeah.
Who the fuck wants to watch 2 vice presidential debates? Listen, you're talking to a guy who watched both conventions on C-SPAN. That's how much of a wonk I am. I don't want 2 vice presidential debates. I want 1.
No one needs that. I want like 4 or 5 or 6 presidential debates.
Yeah, I think they
should be divided by topic.
That would be fascinating. Yeah, just have a defense one,
economy, defense, foreign wars, social, whatever.
I like that. I think the more of those you have, the better. And I would also include Chase Oliver. I would include Jill Stein.
Of course.
Just so you can have some kind of variation. Chase Oliver is getting no money. Stein is getting 2% in some states, in some polling, or less.
That's going to go up. That's going to go up. Progressives are really angry. And I know you're not seeing them in the streets. The reason you're not seeing them in the streets is because, first of all, street protests are just not worth anything. And the left knows that. Basically, starting in 2003 with the Iraq War, millions of people marched. It didn't make any difference. It doesn't, street protests don't really work. Black Lives Matter had a little bit more of an effect because it was a little bit dangerous and edgy, and some things burned. And so the authorities actually pretended to pay attention, but they rolled it all back afterwards, after the protesters went home. So, and then who's going to travel to Chicago and sit in a penned-in free speech zone miles away from the convention site? It just seems like a waste of your hard-earned vacation protest dollars. So just because people are not voting with their feet to go to hit the streets, but they're not going to turn out for her. I predict you're going to see at least 4 or 5% turnout for Jill Stein, and if you combine it with Cornel West, you will see it. Definitely that.
Is Cornel West even on any ballots? I mean,
I don't know the answer to that, but people can write him in.
They could. I think that I don't think Jill Stein's going to get that number. And I think the protesters have proven that they're just not that serious. 2004, New York tried the same thing. Remember, they tried to have the cordoned off protest. This is the official protest area. I remember because I was covering it. And I remember walking. But I remember walking by the chain link fence, officially the designated protest area, and there was 2 people in it. It was just like,
but there were plenty of protests. But yeah, New York.
Well, they were huge protests because people were pissed off about the war, and they went to the streets to protest it. And people aren't that.
And New Yorkers are unruly. I mean, we're not going to we're not going to be like, oh, we're going to go be penned in. Like, we're not following those rules.
Right. Well, my point is that it does happen if you have an actually motivated, smart, assertive protest movement, and they just don't on this issue. It reminds me, but no one does. I mean, look at them.
Don't forget, by November, you're going to, college starts next week. So the Gaza protesters are already starting to appear on campus again.
Okay. So you get 5 people on a flag. What do you fucking do? I'm sorry, Ted. I don't mean to be dismissive, but I'm just.
You may be right. I don't know. I can't predict the future.
Because they don't have the stick-to-itness of it. Remember 2016, Donald Trump gets elected, and the women's march was going to happen every month. It happened 1.5 times.
Yep, that's true. That's true.
Occupy Wall Street even had some staying power, but even that fizzled out.
That's a little different. I mean, there was a lot of problems with Occupy. I was very involved with it, but I'll tell you, in the end, what the Obama administration, Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, coordinated with local law enforcement to simultaneously violently crush hundreds of encampments all in the middle of the night at the same day, at the same time. It was ruthless and brutal. They went in and cracked heads and beat people up. Some protesters actually died. So basically Obama's goons put an end to that. Now, a good protest movement would, take their licks and come back and protest and encamp for another day. But the point is, they definitely took a lot of abuse.
Well, but you're saying that the anti-Vietnam War protesters didn't take abuse.
Great example. That was a different generation, man. They were more serious. And
these people I can't take seriously. I just can't.
No,
but
I hear you.
Okay. All right. Well, on that note, why don't we tie this up in a neat little bow, unless you have something else you wanted to, anything else?
Scott, where can we find all things Scott Stantisian?
You can go to gocomics.com/Scott Stantis, one word, and see my editorial cartoons. You can go to gocomics.com/Prickly City, see my political comic strip. You can go to chicagotribune.com/opinion and see my work I draw for them. You can go to dallasnews.com/opinion and see the cartoons I draw for the Dallas Morning News. You can go to smirkonish.com. I draw 1 cartoon a week for his newsletter, and he uses it on his show and posts it on his webpage. Cool. And we're also on, I mentioned earlier in this podcast, Center Clip, which is sort of a mini podcast. It's 30 seconds, no longer than 5 minutes. Ted does it as well. I love it. I absolutely love having that outlet.
It's a cool format.
Something happens and I can just, say something about it right out of the chute. It's way different than even doing a cartoon about it. So that's centerclip.com. Go check it out. They've just upgraded the software, made it a little better. The webpage is better. We're partnering with Newsweek, and apparently we're going to be partnering with others coming up. It's going to be awesome. So speaking of awesome, Ted, where can we see all things Rawlian?
Well, you can go to X Spaces and Rumble and check out the final countdown on Radio Sputnik with me and Steve Gill, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. until 12 noon. You just Google it if you forget all that, just the final countdown with Ted Rall. Go to whowhatwhy.org on weekends when they run my cartoon. Go to gocomics.com/Ted Rall, rawl.com, and please buy my book, 2024 Revisited. It is a reissue, but all colorized and advanced and annotated.
Where can we get that?
Just get that on Amazon. It's the only place you can get it now. So, on Amazon.
Okay, Amazon.
All right,
I've heard of that.
You have, I'm sure. All right, Scott, thanks as always, and thanks everyone for listening. And we will see you again next week.
Peace.
Happy Labor Day.
Working.